going to move on to Unit 5, which is about basic assessment concepts and perspectives. This unit focuses mainly on designing and moderation of tests and examination papers, and also the two brain hemispheres. All right. So we can look at the layout, the contents of Unit 5. I will be talking about each point shortly. Okay, here we have a graphic representation of the left and right brain hemispheres. I think it's very well done, as it gives us an idea of how these two brain hemispheres can differ. You will see on the left-hand side, it's more the analytic brain, the one that's better with reasoning and logic. And on the right hand, we get the free spirit, the creative person. They love poetry, they love to do art, they love to think creatively, they're passionate, and they're also very calm. These people, it does not necessarily mean that one is better than the other. It is better to have a nice balance between these hemispheres, but we will discuss in more detail. Some of the aspects, I might have mentioned some of them just now, we'll just go through them again. So in order for us to give a good lesson for the class, we have to keep in mind certain things that we can do to make the class easier for right and left brain learners to take in all the information. Some examples for left brain learners would be to write an outline on the board. They are good with listening to lectures. They discuss vocabulary. You can give them crossword puzzles. You can discuss and explain the difficult concepts. You can give them individual assignments and give a research paper as an assessment activity. The right brain, on the other hand, it might be a good idea to outline the lesson that you're going to do and also illustrate with pictures, which flows right into the second point, is that you can use visuals. These learners learn better by seeing pictures than words. You can also use a group activity for them. Give them a project to create something, to make something with their hands, or write a poem. They can play music while they work. The music stimulates their brains and help them to be more creative and learn better. And again, this flows into the last point, to use sound. All right, so that's a very short explanation of what a teacher can do to make sure that they reach all the learners in their class. 5.2 is the relationship between effective learning and effective assessment. Assessment must be free of bias and misrepresentation. The three categories of classroom assessment is summative assessment, diagnostic assessment, and formative assessment. We have also already discussed summative and formative assessments in the previous unit, and we are just going to shortly look at them again. So summative assessment summarizes what learners have learned at the conclusion of an instruction segment. In other words, it gives you a summary of what the learner has learned. All right, the diagnostic assessment is used to check the learner's prior knowledge and skills level. So we are diagnosing what the learner already knows. Formative assessments are ongoing assessments that provide specific feedback to teachers and learners. Again, let's look at the word formative. So it's something that is being formed. All right. 5.2 continues with 7 practices for grading and assessment. These are things that teachers should know. Point 1 is to use summative assessments to frame meaningful performance goals. Number 2, show criteria and models in advance. Assess before teaching. Offer appropriate choices. Provide feedback early and often. And encourage self-assessment and goal setting. Allow new evidence of achievement to replace the old evidence. So this is a very active practice, or 7 active practices that you as a teacher need to keep in mind when you do assessment. Okay. 5.3 is guidelines for planning and setting good examination papers. So when you as a teacher are setting up examination papers, you need to keep the following guidelines in mind. Number 1, probably also the most important one, is to always keep Bloom's taxonomy in mind. We discussed this in Unit 1, and you will keep on hearing Bloom's taxonomy, and you will keep on hearing about the verbs, as that is probably the cornerstone of making good examination papers, and also doing assessment, and also to assess the learners. Keep the different learning styles in mind when you design questions. So the learning styles, if we look at the left and right brain as well, keep the features of the left and right brain assessments in mind when you design a paper. So when you design an examination paper, don't make it all left brain or all right brain. See if you can find a nice balance between the two. All right. The principles underpinning good assessment practice should be complied with, so make sure you are familiar with that. Allow enough time to plan the question paper and give time to design questions. It is much more difficult than it looks, so make sure your time management is well planned out. Be creative in designing questions to make them interesting. This is also quite an important part. Many examination papers are designed, it's the same questions that you find in the study guide, it's just basically copy and paste it into the examination paper. Use your brains, be creative, see where you can find a practical application of where learners can apply what they have learned. Decide beforehand on the content that you want to test, and apply the learning content to new situations. And this goes hand in hand with being creative in designing your examination paper. All right, so that's 8 different principles that you can use to set up good examination papers. All right, we're going to move on now to the moderation of examination papers. So what do we mean when we talk about moderating an exam paper? This is the process whereby teachers compare judgments to either confirm or adjust them. So what will happen here is another teacher may work with you and moderate your examination paper. What they do here is they make sure that there's good quality questions and things don't repeat, and the entire content is covered with your exam paper. So when we look at the specific purpose of moderation, is that it develops shared or common interpretations of standards and expectations. It develops shared understanding of what learners' achievement should look like. It develops accuracy and reliability in making judgments. It ensures judgments are equitable in terms of implication for learning. It strengthens the value of teachers' judgments. It informs well-targeted teachers' programs, and it makes judgments in relation to syllabus standards. If you remember the principles of good assessment, you will see some of these words also there. Everything links into each other. So keeping that in mind, it's easier to also answer your questions and develop exam papers. All right, moving on to 5.6. Here we look at how to proofread examination papers. So what does proofreading mean? It means to examine your text carefully and correct errors and mistakes in grammar, style, and spelling. It is always a good idea to ask one of your colleagues to also read through and make sure that you caught all the errors and that your grammar is correct. because that can cause confusion if a learner is doing examinations and the questions asked are not clear or misspelled. Yeah, so we have to also think about that. All right. At the bottom I said, see your study guide for an example of a proofreading checklist. Okay. All right, 5.7, which is also the last of Unit 5. We will look at how to teach learners to prepare for and write tests and examination papers. So some of the tips that you as a teacher can give to your learner before the test or exam is to they have to be sure that they have all the details of what they need ahead of the exam, and they have to study in a place that is free from distraction. I'm only mentioning 2 points under each of these headings. Go and read up. There are many more tips that you can give your learners. Number 2, during the exam or test, is that they get to their classes or locations, exam locations, and sit down and relax. So they have to be there before the time, as not to rush. And then, of course, not to talk about the test or exam with your friends. Many learners become more anxious when they start talking about certain things that they studied. So try to avoid that. After the test or exam, when you get your test back or exam back, read through the teacher's comments carefully and learn from your mistakes. Okay. Lastly, questions to consider for learners now is, do you study for a test at the last minute, or do you panic about writing tests? Be clear on how you react when you have to go and do an examination. If you know what your weak points are, you can build on that, work on that, and have better results at the end of the day. All right, so that's the end of Unit 5.